5 minutes into our divorce settlement meeting, my husband leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "I want half of what Warren left her." Caleb didn't sound angry. Anger would have been easier to understand. He sounded patient, almost amused, like I was the last person in the room who still didn't understand how marriage worked. My mother Diane sat behind him with both hands wrapped around her purse. My younger sister Taryn was beside her. 9 months earlier, neither one of them would have surprised me by taking his side. That morning, though, something was different. Taryn's head snapped up. My mother stared at Caleb as if she had just heard him insult someone in church. Caleb must have noticed because his smile faltered for half a second before he recovered. "Audrey knows I helped build that life too," he added. I looked at the man I had slept beside for 7 years. The man who made my coffee while my father was dying. The man who later kissed my sister in the back hallway of my father's lake cottage while everyone else was eating Christmas dinner 20 feet away. Then I reached into my bag and placed a small blue flash drive on the conference table. Caleb stopped smiling. Taryn went pale. My mother whispered, "Is that Warren's?" I turned it so everyone could see the strip of faded painter's tape across the side. My father's handwriting was still there in thick black marker. "Christmas, if they press her." Caleb stared at it. "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer him. Taryn did. "Before you ask for another dollar," she said quietly, "you should probably listen." Caleb turned toward her. "Stay out of this." 9 months earlier, she would have lowered her eyes. This time, she looked straight at him. "No." My mother's voice came next. "Audrey doesn't owe you anything." Caleb looked from my mother to my sister, then finally back to me. For the first time since the meeting began, he seemed to understand that he had walked into the room expecting the same family he had learned to use, and that family no longer existed. I touched the flash drive with one finger. "You want to talk about what my father left me?" I asked. "Fine. Then we're going to start with what my father already told you." Caleb's face changed. Not much, but enough. And watching that tiny crack appear, I found myself thinking about the last Christmas we ever spent as a family, the night I learned that an inheritance can expose people faster than it enriches them. My name is Audrey Keene. I was 36 that Christmas, and I worked as an elementary school librarian in a suburb north of Columbus, Ohio. My life was aggressively ordinary. I drove a Subaru with a dent near the back wheel. I owned more cardigans than one person reasonably needed. My kitchen junk drawer contained 4 pairs of scissors, and none of them could cut wrapping paper properly. I spent my days helping second graders find books about sharks and listening to fifth graders claim they hated reading while secretly checking whether the next graphic novel in a series had been returned. I liked routine. I liked things with places, books on shelves, keys on hooks, bills paid before the due date, people who said what they meant. My father was the same way except louder. Warren Keene worked as a union electrician for 38 years. He had large hands, a crooked left thumbnail from a job site accident in the 90s, and a lifelong belief that anything made after 2005 had been deliberately designed to disappoint him. He was not rich when my sister and I were growing up. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch in Westerville with 1 bathroom upstairs, a basement that flooded twice, and a dishwasher Dad insisted was perfectly good, even though it only started if you kicked the bottom corner. When overtime was good, Dad saved money. When overtime was bad, he saved money more angrily. In his early 30s, he bought a neglected duplex with orange carpet aluminum wiring and a porch that leaned noticeably toward the street. My mother called it a money pit. Dad called it Tuesday. He rewired the place after work. 10 years later, he bought another duplex, then a third. He never called himself an investor. If anyone did, he would shake his head and say, "I'm an electrician who accidentally owns 6 toilets." After my parents divorced, Dad bought a modest cottage at Indian Lake, about an hour outside Columbus. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, knotty pine walls, a narrow kitchen that could barely hold 3 adults without somebody getting trapped near the refrigerator. There was a dock that listed slightly to the left no matter how many times Dad repaired it. He loved that place. So did I. My sister Taryn loved it too, but in a different way. Taryn was 3 years younger than me and always understood how to make a room notice her. She was funny, beautiful without seeming to work at it, and could meet someone at a grocery store and somehow end up invited to their birthday party. She managed a busy hair salon in Dublin and was the kind of person customers followed from one salon to another because she remembered their kids' names, divorces, new jobs, and favorite wine. Growing up, Taryn and I were not enemies. That matters. I loved my sister. She loved me too. What we had was worse in a quieter way. We had a family pattern nobody named because naming it would have required somebody to stop benefiting from it. Taryn needed. I understood. Taryn cried. Someone adjusted. Taryn forgot. Someone forgave. Most often that someone was me. My mother had phrases for it. You know how your sister is. Taryn feels things more deeply. You're the independent one. She just needs a little extra reassurance. By the time I was 12, I understood that independent did not mean nobody loved me. It meant my disappointment created less administrative work. When we were teenagers, Dad once promised to take me to help him look at an old rental property on the same Saturday Taryn had a dance competition. Mom said Taryn had been nervous all week and needed both parents there. Dad tried to explain that he had already promised me. Mom stared at him across the kitchen and said, "Audrey understands." He looked at me. I did understand. That was the problem. Go, I told him. He went. Years later, I barely remembered missing the property tour. What I remembered was Taryn coming home with a medal and Mom saying, "See, this is why family shows up." Nobody mentioned that I had shown up too, just somewhere else. Dad started noticing the pattern as we got older, though, not soon enough to stop all of it. Once when I was home from college, Mom suggested using part of the savings account Dad had created for both daughters to help Taryn repeat a semester she had failed after skipping too many classes. I had scholarships, Mom explained. Taryn didn't. Dad said, "Then Taryn gets a job." Mom called him cruel. Taryn cried. Eventually, some money moved. I told everyone it was fine. Dad found me later in the garage. "You don't always have to say that." "Say what?" "That it's fine." I remember shrugging. What am I supposed to say? The truth would be a nice change. That annoyed me at 20. At 36, I understood it differently. My parents divorced when I was 24. There was no spectacular affair exposed at Thanksgiving, no screaming on the front lawn. Dad moved into an apartment. Mom told people they had grown apart. Dad refused to discuss details. Mom managed to communicate resentment through increasingly elegant versions of the sentence. Your father made his priorities clear. Taryn sided with Mom almost immediately. I tried to stay neutral. Dad and I grew closer because neutrality has practical consequences. Somebody needed to help him keep track of tenants. Somebody needed to know which duplex had the water shut off behind the basement shelf, and which furnace required a very specific filter no hardware store ever seemed to have. Somebody had to talk him into getting a smartphone and then answer 17 phone calls about why it kept asking for his password. That somebody was me. Taryn visited Dad. She loved him. She brought him birthday cakes and made him laugh until he coughed. But she did not enjoy maintenance paperwork, doctor's repairs, or anything else that smelled like responsibility disguised as inconvenience. She once told Dad directly, "If you leave me one of those rentals, I will sell it before your funeral flowers die." Dad laughed for 5 full minutes. That sentence mattered later. Everything changed when Dad got sick. The cancer diagnosis came on a Wednesday afternoon. By Friday, Mom had already called me to ask whether I could coordinate his appointments because I was better with schedules. Taryn created an online meal calendar, posted a picture of herself hugging Dad at the oncology center, and then discovered that the treatment floor made her physically nauseated. She still visited, but less often. I became the driver, the note-taker, the person who knew which medication needed food and which one made Dad dizzy if he stood too quickly. I resented it sometimes. That is another truth people clean up in stories about dying parents. I loved my father desperately. I also hated parking garages. I hated hospital coffee. I hated leaving work early, making up the hours driving Dad home, changing his sheets, answering Taryn's texts, asking how is he today when she could have called him herself. Some nights I sat in my car before going inside my house because I needed 5 minutes where nobody could need anything from me. Caleb was good during those months. That fact became painful later because I spent a long time wishing I could retroactively turn him into a villain. He wasn't one then. Or not entirely. Caleb worked in sales for a regional building supply company. He had the kind of personality that made contractors remember him. He could talk to anybody without seeming fake. When Dad first met him, he called Caleb too polished, and then 6 months later started calling him whenever he wanted a discount on cabinets. When Dad got sick, Caleb stepped up. He made coffee before my early appointments. He filled my car with gas. He brought Dad soup and pretended not to notice when Dad ate 4 bites. He spent an entire Saturday helping my brother-in-law, Shane, build a ramp from Dad's back door because Dad refused to admit stairs had become difficult. Shane was Taryn's husband and had been Caleb's friend before either man married into my family. Shane ran a small contracting crew. He was practical, usually covered in drywall dust, and much kinder than people initially assumed because he looked permanently annoyed by sunlight. One afternoon, while Caleb and Shane were finishing the ramp, Dad sat in a folding chair criticizing every measurement. "You know we can remove this thing when you don't need it," Shane told him. Dad snorted. "You planning a resurrection?" Shane stared at him. Caleb laughed so hard he dropped a drill bit. Dad enjoyed that. Later, after Dad died and everything shattered, I remembered those moments because I needed to. I needed proof that not every good thing had been fake. One night after Dad's third round of chemotherapy, I came home and found Caleb sitting on our kitchen floor assembling a shower chair. I started crying. He stood and wrapped his arms around me. "We take care of your dad," he said. "Everything else can wait." I believed him. I think at the time he meant it. That is what makes some betrayals so difficult to survive. If the person was evil from the beginning, you can throw away the whole story. If they loved you once and later chose themselves over you, you have to learn how to live with two truths. Dad's illness lasted 18 months. Near the end, hospice set up a bed in his living room because he wanted to see the maple tree through the front window. I slept on the couch 3 nights during his last week. Taryn came most afternoons. Mom came twice. One evening, Dad asked Mom to speak with him alone. She stayed in the room 14 minutes. I know because I sat in the kitchen watching the microwave clock change numbers while pretending I wasn't listening. When Mom came out, her face was drained. Dad never told me what they discussed. 3 days later, before sunrise, he died while I was holding his hand. Caleb arrived 22 minutes later. He sat beside me. No speech, no advice. He simply sat. Even now, I am grateful for that version of him. At some point during Dad's final week, he caught me trying to organize a stack of bills beside his recliner. "You're cleaning before I'm dead, now I'm organizing. That's what your mother calls cleaning when she wants credit." Dad. He pointed weakly toward the back of the house. "When you finally tackle the workshop, bottom drawer of the bench is yours. What's in it?" "None of your business yet." You realize that sentence makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if you stop asking questions. I smiled. He pointed at me again. "And don't let Diane clean out the garage first. Why would Mom clean your garage? Because she hates not knowing what's in drawers." I laughed. Dad did too. Then he fell asleep. I forgot about that conversation for 5 months. Dad's estate did not make us millionaires overnight the way people imagine. Most of what he had was tied up in property. The 3 duplexes had appreciated dramatically over decades. The cottage was worth much more than he paid. He had retirement savings and some investments. After everything was settled, what passed directly to me was worth a little over $2.4 million. Taryn received $300,000 in cash. Dad's restored 1969 Ford pickup, some jewelry that had belonged to our grandmother, and a savings account Dad had created for any future children she might have. I received the 3 duplexes, the lake cottage, most of his remaining investments, and his tools. Mom divorced from Dad for 12 years, received $40,000, her mother's cedar chest, and a handwritten letter. The first serious argument happened less than 2 weeks later. I was at work shelving books when Mom called. "Are you really keeping all 3 rentals?" "Yes." "Why?" I stood there holding a copy of Because of Winn-Dixie. "Because Dad left them to me. I know what the will says." I immediately hated the direction of the conversation. "Then what are you asking?" "I'm asking whether you've thought about what's fair. Taryn received $300,000. That's cash." "Yes. It disappears. Only if she spends it." Mom exhaled sharply. "Your father created an imbalance." "No. Dad divided his property. Unequally." "Yes." Silence. Then came the old weapon. "You were always his favorite." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I had spent my entire childhood being the child who supposedly needed less. "That's interesting." "It's true. I was taking him to chemo 4 days a week. Taryn had work. So did I. She had Shane. I had Caleb. She isn't like you." There it was. Same sentence, wearing a different coat. Taryn told Dad repeatedly she didn't want the rentals. She may not have understood their value. "That isn't Dad's fault?" Mom's voice hardened. "I hope money doesn't change you." I looked toward the shelf behind my desk. Dad's old work gloves sat there because I could not stand seeing them empty at home. "Money hasn't changed me," I said. "But knowing I have it seems to be changing everybody else." Mom hung up. That night I told Caleb. He was making pasta. He listened quietly, then said, "She's grieving. So am I." "I know." "Then why does her grief require me to redistribute Dad's estate?" Caleb stirred the sauce. "She probably isn't literally asking that. She asked why I'm keeping the rentals." He shrugged. "She's scared." "Of what?" "That your dad is gone and everything is different." I watched him. Then he said something that seemed reasonable at the time. "Just don't let the inheritance turn into a wall between you and your family." I wish I had asked why he assumed the wall would be mine. Instead, I nodded. Time passed. Small lines moved. Thanksgiving was the first moment I should have paid more attention. I opened Instagram that morning and saw Taryn standing on Dad's dock wearing a cream sweater, holding a mug in both hands. Her caption read, "Keeping Dad's traditions alive." I stared at the picture. I had not invited her to the cottage. I texted immediately. Are you at the lake? She replied with a heart. Yeah, just for the morning. Don't be mad. I called Caleb. Did you give Taryn the cottage code? A pause. Then, yeah. Why she wanted to go out there? I know that. Then why are you asking? Because you gave somebody access to my house without asking me. He became quiet. She's your sister. That isn't the point. You weren't using it. That also isn't the point. Caleb sighed. I knew that sigh. It meant I had become the difficult person in a conversation he believed should have been easy. Audrey, are we seriously going to become the kind of people who make family ask permission to sit on a dock? It's my house. He went silent. Then he said softly, Your dad's been gone 5 months, and you're already saying my house. I felt shame almost immediately. That was how good he was at locating the bruise. I didn't mean it like that. How else is there to mean it? I mean legally, exactly. He sounded disappointed. You used to call it Warren's place. He left it to me. I know. Then why are we fighting? I don't know, Audrey. That was the trick. A boundary had become evidence that I was changing. Taryn texted later. Sorry if I overstepped. 30 seconds after that, Dad would hate us fighting about the lake. Dead people become very useful when they can no longer correct anyone. I let it go. That became the pattern. Caleb and Shane had been talking for almost a year about launching a kitchen and bath remodeling company together. Shane knew construction. Caleb knew sales. On paper, they made sense. At first, I supported them. Caleb hated his sales job. Commission rules changed constantly. He came home angry 3 nights a week. Starting something with Shane made him excited again. Then the plan became larger. A showroom, 2 work vans, a warehouse, a designer, inventory, marketing. I started asking questions. How much does this cost? Caleb smiled. That's the conversation. What conversation? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We're thinking about asking you to help. Help how temporary collateral. My stomach tightened. What collateral? One of the duplexes. I pulled my hand away. No. He laughed. You haven't heard the plan. I don't need the plan. Audrey, I'm not putting Dad's property behind a new business. It's not giving it away. No. He looked at me. For a few seconds, I saw genuine surprise. Not anger yet. You won't even consider it, no. Caleb leaned back. Okay, that was all. No argument. I remember feeling relieved. Weeks later, I realized his willingness to stop arguing did not mean he had accepted my answer. It meant he had changed tactics. The next time the business came up was at my mother's house. That should have told me the conversation had been arranged. Mom made pot roast. Taryn opened wine. Shane brought preliminary numbers. Caleb waited until after dinner. Then he put a folder on the table. Just hear us out. I looked at him. I already said no. Taryn frowned. You didn't even know what they were proposing. I knew enough. Shane raised one hand. For the record, I don't want you thinking we're trying to corner you. I liked Shane. That mattered later, too. He slid a page toward me. We'd secure a line of credit. Stanton would only back it. The goal is to refinance out once revenue stabilizes. No. Shane nodded immediately. Okay. Caleb did not. Mom spoke from the end of the table. You didn't think about it. I have thought about it. For how long? Long enough. This could change your husband's life. He can build a business without Dad's duplex. That may take years. Then it takes years. Taryn rolled her eyes. I looked at her. What you always get to be responsible. I almost laughed. What does that mean? You know exactly what it means. No. Explain it. She put down her wine. You inherit millions, and then everybody else has to prove they deserve your help. You inherited $300,000. That isn't the same. Why? Because you have property. So you're secure, and therefore she stared at me. You could help, I could also not. Mom shook her head. Your father would be disappointed hearing you talk like this. I felt my whole body go still. What exactly did Dad tell you he wanted? Mom froze. Caleb immediately stepped in. Nobody's speaking for Warren. You just let her. Audrey. No. She keeps telling me what Dad would think. I want to know when he told her. Mom stared at her plate. Taryn said, "This is why nobody can talk to you anymore. What you make everything a courtroom." The irony of that would become funny months later. That night it hurt. Caleb reached under the table and squeezed my knee. It looked affectionate. It felt like a warning. "Let's go home," he said. I stood. Mom stared at me. Before I reached the door, she said, "At some point, you have to stop hiding behind your father's wishes and decide whether your marriage matters more than property." I turned. My marriage has never asked me to choose. Caleb looked away. I should have noticed. At home, he told me I had embarrassed him. "You embarrassed me in front of Shane. You brought my mother and sister into a conversation about my inheritance. It's not your inheritance, it's our future." I stared at him. He caught himself. "I mean, the business could become part of our future." "Then use something that belongs to us. We don't have anything worth enough. That's not my fault." His face hardened. "You hear how cold you sound. I said no to using Dad's property. You said no to me. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like one." He slept in the guest room. By morning I apologized. That fact embarrassed me for a long time. Not because apologies are weakness, because I apologized for disappointing somebody who was trying to make my boundary feel like betrayal. After that, Caleb became sweeter. Flowers at school. Dinner waiting when I got home. He filled my gas tank. He suggested spending Christmas at Dad's cottage. "Everybody needs a new memory there," he said. I did not want to host Christmas. I was tired. I missed Dad. The cottage still smelled faintly like his soap, but Mom loved the idea. Taryn became excited immediately. Shane said he would bring firewood. Caleb kept saying it would be good for us. Some part of me wanted to prove I was still generous, still family, still the Audrey everybody recognized, so I said yes. On December 24th, the cottage filled by mid-afternoon. Mom arrived with enough groceries to survive a blizzard. Taryn brought 3 bags despite staying 2 nights. Shane came carrying a toolbox because the downstairs bathroom faucet was dripping, and he had apparently decided Dad might haunt him if he ignored it. That made me smile. "You don't have to fix anything." Shane looked offended. "I married into this family. Warren's ghost knows where I live." He fixed the faucet, then tightened the loose porch rail without being asked. While he worked, he told me a story about Dad driving 40 minutes to a job site the previous winter just to tell Shane he was using the wrong kind of exterior screws. He could have called. Dad believed criticism had to be delivered in person. Shane laughed. "He brought me lunch, too. That was Warren. Correction first, sandwich second." I remember that conversation because 2 hours later I watched Shane's entire marriage collapse. Dinner began almost normally. Ham, mashed potatoes, Mom's green beans, football muted on the television, Dad's old Christmas playlist. We told stories. Taryn imitated Dad answering the phone with his usual irritated, "Yeah." Shane laughed until he coughed. Caleb raised his glass. To Warren. We all followed. Then Caleb looked at me, and to Audrey for keeping everything together. I wanted to believe him. That may be the saddest part. Even after months of tension, I wanted my husband back more than I wanted to be suspicious. I spilled gravy on my sweater around 8:30. Mom said, "That's why I told you not to wear cream." I went upstairs to change. Halfway down the hall, my phone buzzed. Motion detected rear hall. Dad had installed cameras years earlier after somebody stole tools from his shed. I replaced the old system after his death. Usually alerts were Shane taking the dog out. I almost ignored it. Then I saw Taryn in the preview, and Caleb, standing near the mudroom. Close, too close. I opened the live feed. For a second, nothing happened. They were simply facing each other. Then Caleb touched her waist. His hand did not hesitate. Taryn whispered something I couldn't hear. He leaned down and kissed her. My body reacted before my mind did. My knees weakened. I sat on the edge of Dad's bed. The kiss was not dramatic. That made it worse. It was familiar, brief, comfortable. A kiss between people who knew they would have another. Taryn stepped back first. "You said tonight was the last time." Caleb glanced toward the kitchen. "It is." "Then why is Shane still talking about January? Because until she signs, nothing changes." My heart started pounding. Taryn crossed her arms. "She's going to say no. Not if Diane pushes. Your wife isn't stupid." "I didn't say she was. You keep acting like you can manage her." Caleb lowered his voice. "Audrey hates being called selfish more than she hates almost anything." That sentence hurt more than the kiss. Because it was true. He knew. He had identified the exact fear my family built in me and was counting on it. Taryn looked away. "And the lake place," Caleb stiffened. "Not now. You promised me," I said later. "When, Taryn? You always say later. Keep your voice down. I'm tired of sitting across from her pretending." Caleb touched her arm. "Just get through tonight." And then, he looked toward the hallway again. "Then we stopped pretending. I stopped the feed. I sat very still. I did not immediately think my husband is cheating on me. My first thought was Shane is downstairs. That was absurd. Then I thought, they talked about Dad's property while Dad was dying. Then Mom knows about the paperwork. Then Caleb believes I can be pressured." My hands started shaking. I looked around Dad's bedroom, his dresser, his old lamp, a framed picture of Taryn and me as children. Then I remembered his voice. "Bottom drawer of the bench is yours. Don't let Diane clean out the garage first." I had never gone through the workshop. Every time I tried, grief made the room feel too occupied. But that night I suddenly understood Dad had not been talking about tools. I changed sweaters, went downstairs. Caleb was laughing at something Shane said. Taryn sat by the fireplace. She did not look at me. That almost broke me. Caleb smiled. "Better much." I put on my coat. "Where are you going?" Mom asked. "Garage." Shane stood. "What do you need extension cords? I'll grab them." "No." Everyone looked at me. I smiled. "I know where Dad kept them." Shane sat back down. "All right." Caleb watched me for 1 second too long. Then he said, "Don't freeze." I walked through the snow. The detached garage was dark. When I flipped the lights on, the fluorescent tubes flickered twice. Dad would have complained. The room smelled like cold metal sawdust and old oil. His workbench sat exactly as he left it, tools on pegboard, coffee cans filled with screws, an ancient radio. I crouched. Bottom drawer, locked. I almost laughed. Of course. Then I remembered Dad pressing something into my palm during hospice. A small brass key I had put onto my keyring without thinking. I tried it. The drawer opened. Inside was a plastic storage box. On top was a note. AUD. If you're reading this because your mother started telling you what I would have wanted, I called it. I laughed. A broken sound in an empty garage. Underneath also, if this computer makes you update Windows before it plays the video, that is not my fault. I started crying. There was an old laptop on the shelf. I plugged it in. Inside the box were 3 flash drives, a small digital recorder, and several envelopes. One flash drive had blue tape. Audrey. Another Diane. The third, Sal. I opened Audrey first. Dad appeared on the screen, sitting at the same workbench. He looked thinner than I remembered. A knit cap covered his head. He frowned at the camera. Is the red light supposed to stay on? A woman's voice off screen said yes. It sounded like his hospice nurse. All right. Dad looked into the lens. Audrey, if you're watching this, either I'm dead or you finally learned to open a drawer without asking 14 questions. I laughed through tears. He coughed. First thing, the rentals. He rubbed his nose. I left them to you because you know what the hell you're doing. That sounded like Dad. Not a speech, just Dad. Taryn told me at least 12 times she wanted cash, not tenants. I wrote it down the last time because I knew somebody would forget. He held up a yellow legal pad. November 3rd. She said, quote, "If you leave me a duplex, I'm selling it before your funeral flowers die." I laughed again. Dad smiled. She's not wrong. She'd hate it. Then his face softened. You don't. He looked down. You know Ellis pays late. You know the Stanton furnace rattles. You know which tenant needs 2 days warning because she works nights and sleeps until noon. He shrugged. That's why. A pause. Not because I loved you more. My breath caught. Dad looked uncomfortable. He was never good with emotional sentences. I loved both of you. He tapped the table. Different kids, different stuff. Then he sighed. Your mother is going to make this complicated. He looked off camera. Diane always thinks fairness means nobody gets upset. Back to me. That's not fairness. He hesitated. You were easy to overlook, Odd. My eyes filled. Dad grimaced. That sounded awful. He tried again. You weren't easier to love. I covered my mouth. You just kept going when things hurt. He looked down. Your mother and I used that. My chest tightened. I did too. He rubbed his hands together. I'm sorry. No perfect speech. No dramatic music. Just my father looking uncomfortable because apologies embarrassed him. I should have asked more often if you were okay, instead of deciding you were. I cried silently. Then he pointed at the camera. So if your mother says you owe anybody part of those buildings because you're the strong one, tell her I said that's nonsense. He paused. Use a nicer word if kids are around. I laughed again. Then Dad's face changed. And Caleb. I stopped. Dad leaned back. I liked him. Past tense. He helped me. I know that. My throat tightened. I'm not going to rewrite that. Dad scratched the side of his face. But lately he asks too many questions about things that aren't his. My hands went cold. Stanton. The cottage. Whether married people should make decisions together. Dad stared at the camera. Marriage is together. He shrugged. But my buildings aren't a marriage. Then he looked irritated. That sentence sounded stupid. I smiled through tears. You know what I mean. He leaned closer. If Caleb asks you to use the rentals for that business with Shane. I already told him no when he floated it with me. I froze. Dad continued. He said he was only asking. A pause. Maybe he was. Dad's eyes narrowed, but he heard my answer. He pointed toward the camera. If he asks again after I'm gone, then misunderstanding isn't the problem. The video ended. I sat there. I replayed the final 30 seconds. Dad had already told Caleb no. Caleb never mentioned it. Then I opened the file labeled Diane. Dad looked more tired in this recording. Diane. He sighed. I know you hate when I leave things unfinished. He smiled faintly. So finish this. He was quiet for several seconds. There's something you owe Taryn. My skin prickled. Dad continued. I'm not telling it for you. A pause. You and I agreed on that a long time ago. I leaned closer. But you do not get to use your fear about that secret to keep making Audrey pay for it. My heart stopped. What secret? I whispered. Dad could not answer. He shook his head slowly. You protected one daughter from a rejection that never happened, and half the time you did it by asking the other daughter to move. He looked exhausted. Stop. That was all. No explanation. No reveal. Just stop. Then he said, if I'm gone, you don't get to turn me into a reason Audrey has to give things away. A cough. I'm not there to argue with you. A tiny smile. That probably sounds convenient. The video ended. I stared at the screen. Something had happened between Mom and Dad. Something involving Taryn. Something Dad had protected. I had no idea what it was. Then I opened Cal. Dad was wearing an Ohio State sweatshirt. This video looked older. Before hospice. He seemed stronger. Caleb. Dad frowned. I'm recording this because I'm tired, and if we have this conversation again, Audrey can play it for you instead. My pulse jumped. I like your business idea. Dad scratched the table. I think Shane's good at what he does. Then I think you're good at selling it. A pause. I also think building a company around property your wife inherited from me is a bad idea. He looked into the camera. I told you today Stanton is not collateral unless Audrey decides by herself she wants it to be. My throat tightened. Don't make my daughter prove she loves you by risking something I spent 30 years building. Dad rubbed his face. She'll do too much if you make her feel guilty. I stopped breathing. That is not permission to make her feel guilty. The screen blurred through my tears. Dad shook his head. I hope you never see this honestly. A little smile. That would mean I worried for nothing. Then he pointed at the camera. But if you are seeing it, listen carefully. He paused. She said no. Another pause. Then you have your answer. The video ended. I sat in the cold garage while Christmas music played faintly through the cottage walls. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to lock the door and sleep under Dad's workbench like a child. Then my phone buzzed. Caleb. Where are you? I stared at the message. Another appeared. Everything okay? I looked at Dad's note. At the bottom, written in pencil, he had added, Stop apologizing before you've done anything wrong. I took the blue flash drive, the Diane drive, the Cal drive, the recorder. Then I walked back toward the house. When I entered, the living room had changed. A folder sat on the coffee table. Beside it was a wrapped box. Shane was sitting forward. Mom had her glasses on. Taryn stared at the fire. Caleb smiled. There you are. He handed me the box. Merry Christmas. Inside was a fountain pen, dark green with gold trim. I loved pens. He knew that. The fact that the gift was perfect hurt in a strangely intimate way. Turn it over, he said. Under the pen was a document. I unfolded it. A preliminary lending authorization. Stanton Avenue duplex. Collateral. My name. I looked at Caleb. You said we were done talking about this. We were done arguing. That's not the same thing. Shane immediately said, Audrey, if you don't want this, don't sign it. Caleb looked annoyed. Shane, no. She needs to know. He turned to me. I was told you were willing to review it. I looked at Caleb. He smiled tightly. I said you were open to seeing the final numbers. I said no. Mom leaned forward. You said no before you understood the opportunity. I stared at her. This is why you wanted Christmas here. No. Taryn. She said nothing. Taryn. She looked at me. I knew they were bringing paperwork. Did you know I had already said no? Her eyes moved toward Caleb. That was answer enough. I sat down. How much? Shane answered. 480,000. I laughed. Nobody else did. You want almost $500,000 backed by Dad's property. It's temporary, Caleb said. Everything is temporary until you lose it. We're not going to lose it. If the business fails, it won't. That wasn't my question, Shane answered instead. The lender could go after Stanton. Caleb glared at him. Shane shrugged. She asked. Mom said, your father took risks. Dad saved for 11 years before buying his first duplex. Different generation, different definition of risk. Caleb sat beside me. He lowered his voice. Can we talk upstairs, number Audrey? No. His jaw tightened. I picked up the pen. Everyone relaxed slightly. That told me more than anything. Mom's shoulders lowered. Caleb leaned closer. Taryn looked at him. Shane watched me cautiously. I held the pen over the signature line, then stopped. If I say no, what happens? Silence. Caleb smiled. Nothing. Really? Yes. I looked at Mom. If I say no, are you going to accept it? She frowned. Why are you doing this simple question? You're making it sound like we're forcing you. Then say yes. Mom looked away. Taryn. She crossed her arms. You already know you're going to say no. That isn't what I asked. She stared at me. I set the pen down. No. Mom stood immediately. There it was. You haven't read everything. No. This affects more than you. Still no. Caleb's voice sharpened. Can you stop saying it like you're proud of it? I looked at him. Should I be ashamed? That's not what I said. You've spent months acting like my answer is a character defect. Audrey. No. His expression changed. For the first time, I saw anger without affection wrapped around it. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is trying to build something with someone who assumes the worst? I almost laughed. You lied to Shane and told him I was willing to review this. I thought you would. Dad already told you no. The room went still. Caleb froze. Mom looked at him. What I watched his face. There are moments when guilt does not look like fear. It looks like calculation interrupted. What are you talking about? Caleb asked. Dad recorded a video. His eyes narrowed. What video? One where he says you already asked about Stanton. Shane looked at him. You talked to Warren. It was casual. You told me he never weighed in. He didn't. He literally told you no. Caleb stood. Audrey, whatever Warren said when he was sick, he wasn't sick in the video. Silence. Taryn stood suddenly. I need to say something. Caleb turned. No. One word. Sharp. Too sharp. Shane looked between them. What Taryn's eyes filled. Caleb stepped toward her. Not now. She laughed bitterly. That's what you always say. Shane went still. I stayed seated. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it. Taryn looked at me. I'm sorry. I said nothing. She swallowed. You deserve to know. Caleb said her name. Taryn. She turned on him. You told me tonight was the last time. Shane's face changed, not understanding yet, but approaching it. Last time for what nobody answered. Shane looked at Taryn, then at Caleb, then back. Taryn. She started crying. Caleb and I have been seeing each other. The room became silent. No gasp, no screaming, just silence. Shane looked at his wife. How long she covered her mouth. Taryn. April. He closed his eyes. Dad had still been alive in April. That was the first thing I thought. Shane apparently thought it too. His face changed. Were you sleeping with him while Warren was dying? Taryn did not answer. That silence lasted longer than any sentence could have. Shane stepped backward. Oh my God. Mom sat down. Caleb ran both hands over his face. Shane, listen. No. Nothing happened the way Shane laughed once. Please. Caleb stopped. Shane looked at Taryn. I built his ramp with him. She cried. I know. I drove him to treatment when Audrey got stuck at school. I know. You were sleeping with Caleb then. She looked at the floor. Shane's face twisted. For a moment I thought he might hit Caleb. He didn't. That was never Shane. Instead, he walked to the fireplace and put both hands on the mantel. His shoulders shook once. That hurt more to watch. Mom whispered, How could you? Taryn looked at her sharply. Don't. Mom stared. Don't what act like you didn't help any of this. I helped you sleep with your sister's husband, no. Taryn wiped her face. You just spent months telling me Audrey had too much. That has nothing to do with this. You told me the lake place should stay family property. It should. I looked at Mom. What she froze. Taryn laughed through tears. See? Mom looked at me. I meant eventually. Shared access. Holidays. You discussed my house with Taryn. Mom's mouth tightened. I said your father would have wanted both daughters to enjoy it. Taryn turned toward Caleb. You said we could live here. Everything in me stopped. Shane turned around. Mom stared. Caleb closed his eyes. Taryn. You did. Taryn stopped talking. No. Her voice cracked. You promised me. I stood. This house. She looked at me. I'm sorry. This house, yes. The house Dad bought after the divorce. She cried harder. Yes. The place where he spent his last healthy summer. Audrey. The dock I painted while you were in Nashville. I know how it sounds. I stared at her. No. My voice was strangely calm. I don't think you do. Caleb stepped forward. That was never a real plan. Taryn spun toward him. You showed me pictures of the upstairs bedroom. Shane looked at Caleb. What the hell is wrong with you? Caleb said nothing. Taryn continued. You said once she signed the loan and you two separated, you'd make sure the cottage stayed available. Audrey would never have lost the cottage. That's not what you told me. I was trying to calm you down. So every promise was just whatever worked in the moment, Caleb snapped. You were married too. Taryn looked like he slapped her. Shane laughed. That's your defense. Caleb looked at him. No, you're right. Shane picked up his coat. There isn't one. Taryn moved toward him. Shane. He stepped back. She stopped. Please don't go. I don't know where I'm going. Please. He looked at her. I know where I'm not staying. Then he turned toward Caleb. The business is done. Caleb's head snapped up. Don't make decisions tonight. Shane stared at him. You slept with my wife. We have signed commitments. You have commitments. We both do. Not anymore. Caleb stepped closer. You're going to throw away a year of work. Shane laughed. You did that. Caleb stopped. Shane looked at me. I'm sorry. I nodded. He went to the door. Before leaving, he turned back to me. One thing. I waited. When Caleb first met you, he didn't know what Warren owned. Caleb's face changed. I looked at Shane. What he knew Warren had rentals because I'd mentioned jobs I did for him. But he didn't know the values. He wasn't chasing you. Caleb stared at Shane surprised. Shane continued. Actually, after your first date, I made a joke about Warren owning property, and Caleb told me to shut up because he was trying to get a second date, not a financial report. For 1 second, relief and pain collided inside me. Shane looked at Caleb. That's why I don't understand you now. Neither did I. Shane left. The door closed. Caleb stared after him. Then he turned toward me. I did love you. I nodded slowly. I know. He seemed surprised. Taryn stopped crying long enough to look at me. Mom looked confused. Caleb whispered, Then you know I didn't marry you for money. I don't think you did. His face softened with relief. That was almost crueler than accusing him. But somewhere along the way, I said you started thinking loving me gave you a claim to everything connected to me. His relief vanished. No. Yes. Audrey. You helped Dad when he was sick. I loved him. I believe you. His eyes filled. You made my coffee every morning. I loved you. I believe that too. He stared at me. Then how can you? Because loving someone once doesn't excuse what you choose later. Silence. I stepped closer. You didn't have to marry me for Dad's money to become greedy about it. Caleb's face crumpled. You got tired of hearing no. He looked away. You decided my boundary meant I didn't believe in you. He said nothing. So you started treating my inheritance like a test of my marriage. Audrey. And while you were angry that I wouldn't risk Dad's property, you slept with Taryn. Mom whispered, My God. I turned toward her. No. She looked at me. Don't do that. Do what act surprised at the part you didn't know, so you don't have to look at the part you helped. Her face tightened. I did not cause an affair. I didn't say you did. Taryn made her own choices. Yes. So did Caleb. Yes. Mom lifted her chin. Then don't drag me into it. I stared at her. You spent months telling me I was selfish because I wouldn't give him access to Dad's property. I thought you were damaging your marriage. There. What that? I laughed once. You still think my boundary damaged my marriage more than his resentment did. I didn't say that. You're about to. Mom shook her head. You shut Caleb out. Even Caleb whispered Diane stop. Mom continued anyway. You made everything Warren left you untouchable. It was mine. There. That. She pointed at me. That attitude. I went very still. The blue flash drive was in my coat pocket. So was the one labeled Diane. I took it out. Mom's face changed instantly. Not curiosity. Fear. What is that? I looked at her. You know, no. Dad left you something. Her mouth closed. Taryn stared at us. What I walked to the television. Dad had bought a smart TV 2 years earlier and spent 6 months complaining that turning it on now required a computer science degree. There was a USB port on the side. I inserted the drive. Mom stood. Audrey. I turned. You've been telling me what Dad would have wanted since the funeral. Her eyes filled. Don't. Why this isn't the time? I almost smiled. That sentence is getting very popular tonight. Taryn looked at Mom. What is on there? Mom sat down. I pressed play. Dad appeared. Taryn covered her mouth. Mom stared at the screen. Dad cleared his throat. Diane. He looked irritated already. I know you hate when I leave things unfinished. Nobody moved. There is something you owe Taryn. Taryn's head turned slowly toward Mom. Dad continued. I am not telling it for you. Mom started crying. What? Taryn whispered. Dad's recorded face softened. You and I made that decision together a long time ago. Maybe it was right then. I don't know if it's right now. He coughed. But you do not get to use your fear about that secret to keep making Audrey pay. Taryn stood. Mom. Mom shook her head. Dad continued. You protected one daughter from a rejection that never happened. A pause. And too often you did it by asking the other daughter to move. Taryn stared at Mom. What is he talking about? Mom whispered. Not now. Taryn laughed. The sound was frightening. When Mom cried. Taryn. What is he talking about? Dad's video ended. The television went black. Taryn stepped toward Mom. What truth? Mom looked at me. I did not know. That was important. For once nobody could accuse me of engineering the reveal. I don't know, I said. Taryn looked back at Mom. Tell me. Mom shook her head. Please. Tell me. Silence. Taryn's voice broke. Mom. Diane closed her eyes, then said the sentence she had apparently been carrying for 33 years. Warren wasn't your biological father. Nobody moved. Taryn stared at her. I felt as if the room tilted. What? Mom cried harder. You were 10 months old when he found out. Taryn's mouth opened. No sound came. Mom continued. Your biological father was someone I knew before Warren and I married. We had one night together after your father and I had already become serious. Dad knew, yes. When before you turned 1. Taryn took a step backward. And he stayed. Mom nodded. He loved you. Taryn looked toward the dark television. He knew. Yes. All my life. Yes. And he never treated me differently. No. Mom's answer came instantly. Never. Taryn's entire face changed. Not grief. Understanding. A terrible kind. Then why did you? Mom froze. What? Why did you? I didn't. You did. Taryn. You did. Her voice rose. You were always terrified I was hurt. Mom started shaking her head. You gave me everything. I was trying to protect you. From what? Mom stopped. From finding out. I didn't know. That was the point. No. Taryn shook her head violently. No, Mom. Dad knew and still came to every stupid dance recital. Mom cried. Yes. He taught me to drive. Yes. He bought me that ridiculous purple bike. Yes. He stayed up all night when I had pneumonia. Mom nodded. He was my father. Yes. Then what exactly were you protecting me from? Mom had no answer. Taryn's eyes moved toward me. I saw it before she said anything. Oh my God. She looked back at Mom. You weren't protecting me from Dad. Mom cried. Taryn, you were protecting yourself. Silence. You were scared I'd find out what you did. Mom lowered her face. And every time you felt guilty, you gave me more. She looked at me. You made Audrey give me more. My throat tightened. Mom whispered I didn't mean to. Taryn laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't. She wiped her face. You spent my whole life treating me like I was one bad day away from being abandoned by a man who had already chosen me. Mom looked shattered. Taryn continued, and you trained me to think being loved meant someone else had to move. I felt those words. So did she. Her eyes met mine. For the first time that night, I think my sister saw the full shape of us. The childhood bedroom arguments, the college money, the birthdays, the changed plans, Dad's time, Mom's attention, the cottage, Caleb, chosen. I watched her understand that the affair had not begun with Caleb. Not really. It had begun with a pattern. That did not absolve her. It explained the road. Mom looked at me. I'm sorry. I did not answer. Not yet. Caleb was sitting on the edge of the sofa. For once he seemed almost irrelevant. Then I remembered the third drive. Cal. I inserted it. Caleb looked up. Audrey. Dad appeared on the screen. I like your business idea. Caleb closed his eyes. Shane's good at what he does. You're good at selling it. Dad scratched his cheek. But Stanton is not collateral unless Audrey decides by herself she wants it to be. Mom stared at Caleb. Taryn slowly turned toward him. Dad continued. Don't make my daughter prove she loves you by risking something I spent 30 years building. My eyes filled again. She'll do too much if you make her feel guilty. Dad paused. That is not permission to make her feel guilty. Caleb looked at the floor. If she says no, you have your answer. The screen went black. No one moved. Then Taryn said quietly, You knew. Caleb looked at her. Taryn, you knew Dad had told you no. It was a conversation. You told me Audrey was being unreasonable. She was refusing to consider number. Taryn stood straighter. He told you. Caleb's face hardened. Don't suddenly pretend you're innocent. I'm not. Her voice broke. I'm not innocent at all. That silenced him. But you don't get to use what I did to make what you did disappear. Mom looked at Caleb. You told me Audrey was shutting you out. I was. No. Mom shook her head. She said no. Caleb stared at her. That was the first time Diane had ever framed my answer that way. Not as stubbornness, not as selfishness, as an answer. I noticed. So did he. Caleb stood. I'm leaving. I nodded. He looked at me. Can we talk tomorrow, number Audrey? No. He closed his eyes. What am I supposed to do? For 1 second the old reflex activated. Hotel. Ride. Weather. Was he safe to drive? Then I heard Dad. Stop apologizing before you've done anything wrong. I don't know. Caleb stared at me. You don't care I care. His face softened. I finished. I'm just not responsible for solving it. That hurt him. It also freed me. He went upstairs, packed a bag. When he came down, Taryn would not look at him. Mom did. What you did to both my daughters is unforgivable. I turned toward her. Mom. She looked at me. What? Don't make him responsible for what Taryn did. Her face changed. Taryn cried. I continued. Caleb betrayed me. Then I looked at my sister. So did Taryn. No one rescued anyone. That was the first honest moment our family had experienced in decades. Caleb left. The front door closed. Taryn sat on the floor. Mom moved toward her automatically. Taryn held up one hand. Please don't. Mom stopped. That tiny boundary broke something open. For years, Mom's comfort had come without being asked for. Now even the daughter she had overprotected was saying no. Mom sat alone. I went upstairs. I locked Dad's bedroom door. Not because I feared anyone. Because for the first time in my life, I wanted a room nobody could enter simply because we were family. I woke before 5. For several seconds I forgot. Then everything returned. Caleb, Taryn, Dad's video, Mom's secret, Shane leaving, the cottage. I lay there and listened to the furnace. At 6 I went downstairs. Mom was awake. She sat at the kitchen table with untouched coffee. Her face looked 10 years older. "I'm sorry," she said. "No conditions, no if, no explanation." I waited. She continued. "I did what your father said. Yes. I told myself it was because Taryn needed more. Yes. But it was because I was afraid." I looked at her. Yes. She started crying. I didn't know what else to do. "You could have trusted Dad." She closed her eyes. "I know. You could have trusted Taryn." She nodded. "I know. You could have stopped making me pay." Her chin trembled. "I know. I believed she meant it." Then less than a minute later, she said, "I'm worried about Taryn." I laughed. Mom stopped. It was not a cruel laugh, just exhausted disbelief. "What, you made it less than 60 seconds?" Her face fell. "I'm her mother. And mine." Silence. I leaned back. "You apologized to me and immediately made her crisis my assignment." Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. For once she caught herself. "I did. Yes." She looked down. "I don't know how to do this differently." That was possibly the most truthful thing she had ever said. "Learn." She looked at me. "I mean it. I know. You don't change, so I'll forgive you." Her eyes filled. "You changed because what you were doing was wrong." Mom nodded. It hurt her. "Good. Change that costs nothing rarely survives." Taryn came downstairs around 7. No makeup, hair tied back, she looked small. She sat across from me. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." "Good." She nodded. "I don't deserve it. I don't know that forgiveness works like that." She looked up. "If I ever forgive you, it won't be a reward you earn." She swallowed. "Then what is it?" "Something I decide if carrying this becomes heavier than releasing it." Her eyes filled. "That might take a long time." "I know." She stared at her hands. "I was jealous of you." I said nothing. "Not just about Caleb." "I know. Dad trusted you. He loved you. I know that now. He loved you then." Taryn cried. "I know. Then what did you want from me?" She stared at the table. "For you to not be the one he depended on." I felt something shift inside me. "You could have shown up." She flinched. "I know. You could have gone to chemo." "I know. You could have helped with the rentals." "I know. You wanted the result without the work." She closed her eyes. Yes, that honesty mattered. Then she whispered, "Caleb choosing me felt like—" She stopped. I knew the word. "Winning." She shook her head. "Chosen." There it was. I leaned back. Taryn cried. "Mom made everything feel like that." I looked at her. "No." She blinked. "Mom created the pattern." I kept my voice calm. "You chose what you did with it." Her face crumpled. "Yes. That matters." "I know. I spent years moving so you wouldn't feel left out." She wiped her face. "I know. I'm done." Her shoulders shook. "I know." There was no dramatic reconciliation, no hug, no promise. Mom and Taryn left before noon. I changed the cottage code before they reached the highway. I changed the alarm, the Wi-Fi password, the locks at our Columbus house. Every password Caleb knew. Those were practical things. The emotional changes took longer. Caleb stayed in a hotel for several weeks, then rented an apartment. He sent flowers. I returned them. He wrote letters. I read one. In it he wrote that he had loved me and still loved me. I believed him. That was not enough. One of the hardest lessons I learned was that love is not an automatic argument for access. Someone can love you and still be unsafe for you. Caleb wanted another chance to explain. I did not need more explanation. I understood. His resentment had grown slowly. At first, he supported my work with Dad. Then Dad's properties became valuable. Then the business idea needed money. Then my refusal felt to Caleb like rejection. He began listening to Mom's complaints because they supported what he wanted. He began noticing Taryn because she admired the future he described. She made him feel ambitious instead of greedy. He made her feel chosen instead of secondary. Two wounds recognized something useful in each other. Then they called it love. Shane ended the business before it launched. I did not ruin it. That distinction mattered. Caleb lost his business partner because he slept with his partner's wife. I did not need revenge. His own decisions arrived with consequences. Mom called every day the first week. I answered twice, then once a week. She hated it. I'm trying, I know. How am I supposed to show you I'm changing if you won't let me? You don't change because I'm watching. Silence. You change because you don't want to be that person anymore. She did not like hearing that, but she heard it. Taryn texted too. At first long apologies, then memories, then photos of Dad. I rarely answered. One afternoon she sent a picture of a therapist's waiting room. No explanation. I wrote good. She replied, I know this doesn't fix anything. I said, no, but maybe it stops you from breaking the next thing. 2 days later, fair. That was the first conversation we had that felt new. Not kind, not warm, honest. 6 months after Christmas, Caleb and I started formal divorce proceedings. The details were boring. That was almost comforting. Bills, furniture, the house, retirement accounts, normal things. The one issue Caleb refused to let go was Dad's property. His argument was emotional more than legal. He had helped maintain it. I had been part of Dad's life. He had supported me while I managed the rentals. Therefore, in his mind, he deserved some value from them. That belief brought us back to the conference room 9 months after Christmas. Caleb sat across from me. His attorney sat beside him, mine beside me. Mom and Taryn were there because some family property still stored at the cottage needed to be discussed later. Caleb looked thinner, older. But when Dad's inheritance came up, some of the old confidence returned. I want half of what Warren left her. My attorney started to respond. I touched his arm. Let him finish. Caleb looked at me. I helped build that life too. Taryn's head came up. My mother stared. Caleb continued. I spent weekends at those buildings. I helped Warren. I supported Audrey while she handled everything. Taryn said no. Caleb turned. Taryn, no. Her hands trembled, but she continued. You helped Dad because you were family. Caleb's face hardened. Stay out of this. You made me part of it. Silence. She looked at me, then back at him. You told me Audrey was selfish because she wouldn't use Stanton. Caleb said nothing. You knew Dad had already told you no. That video doesn't change what I contributed. Mom spoke. It changes everything. Caleb looked at her. Diane sat straighter. For most of my life, that posture meant she was preparing to tell me why Taryn needed something. This time she looked at Caleb. Audrey does not owe you anything. Caleb laughed bitterly. You spent months telling her the opposite. Mom's face tightened. Yes. The room went very quiet. I was wrong. Caleb stared. Mom continued. I spent years teaching Audrey that because she could survive disappointment, she should be the one disappointed. Her voice shook. I'm not doing it again. I looked at my mother. Something inside me loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Taryn opened her purse. I have something too. She removed an old phone. Caleb froze. What is that Shane's old work phone? His face changed. Taryn looked at me. Shane gave it to me when he moved his things out. She unlocked it. I found messages between him and Caleb. Caleb leaned toward his attorney. His attorney whispered something. Taryn continued. The first ones are from when Caleb met Audrey. My stomach tightened. She read. Shane Warren's oldest daughter will be at the barbecue Saturday. Don't ask about rentals. She hates money talk. Caleb wasn't planning to, trying to get a second date before I start asking about her dad's toilets. Shane, you've had one date. Caleb, exactly. Second date comes next. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That sounded like the man I married. Taryn looked at me. There's nothing bad for years. Caleb watched her. Then she scrolled. Then Warren got sick. She read another. Caleb Shane. If we ever do the showroom, Audrey could back it with one of the rentals. Shane, don't build a business plan around your wife's inheritance. Caleb. It'll be ours someday anyway. The room changed. Caleb closed his eyes. Taryn continued. Shane, that's not how Audrey thinks. Caleb, she'll come around. Another message months later. Caleb Warren said no on Stanton. Shane, then that's that. Caleb, he won't be the one deciding forever. Nobody moved. I looked at Caleb. He stared at the table. That message hurt more than if he had planned to marry me for money. Because Shane's phone showed exactly what I had suspected. Caleb had loved me. Then entitlement grew. Slowly. Ordinarily. A joke became a thought. A thought became an expectation. An expectation became resentment. Resentment became pressure. Pressure became betrayal. I looked at him. I think you loved me. His eyes filled. I did. I think Dad liked you. Caleb nodded. He did. And that makes this worse. He looked at me. Because there's no easy story where you were always using me. He closed his eyes. You became someone who thought loving me gave you rights I never gave you. He whispered, I know. For the first time, he said it without defending himself. The mediator asked whether he still intended to pursue a claim against Dad's property. Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. He looked at Mom, then Taryn, then me. I saw something painful move through him. The realization that the same family pressure he once counted on had turned, not against him, away from him. There is a difference. He had once believed Mom would shame me. She refused. He had believed Taryn would protect him. She told the truth. I had believed I would eventually surrender because being called selfish hurt me. I no longer cared what he called me. I'm dropping it, he said. The mediator asked him to confirm. I'm dropping the inheritance claim. I felt no rush, no triumphant music, just relief. Caleb looked at me. I don't want the properties. You did 10 minutes ago. I know. Why stop now? He stared at his hands. Because if I keep fighting for them, I have to keep pretending losing you was somehow about money. I waited. He swallowed. It wasn't. No, I lost you because I couldn't accept that no was enough. That was the closest thing to truth he had given me in months. I nodded. Yes. The rest of the meeting was ordinary. The house we bought together would be sold. We would divide what actually belonged to both of us. Caleb kept his retirement savings. I kept mine. No dramatic legal speech. No courtroom humiliation. No police. Real revenge, I learned, is often much quieter than internet stories make it sound. Sometimes it is simply refusing to sign the wrong paper. Sometimes it is watching the person who counted on your guilt discover that guilt no longer works. When the meeting ended, Caleb stood by the door. Do you remember our first date? Yes. You ordered black coffee. Tea. He blinked, then laughed quietly. Right. Coffee was the second date. He nodded. I really did pay attention. I know. His eyes filled. I'm sorry I made you question whether any of it was real. I considered that. That might be the part I forgive last. He nodded, then left. Outside the conference room, Mom and Taryn sat on opposite sides of a wooden bench. For most of my life, I would have immediately asked whether they needed lunch, a ride, anything. Mom looked up. Taryn and I are going to eat. I waited. Then Mom asked, would you like to come? Not you should come. Not family should be together. Not Taryn needs you. Would you like to? A tiny difference. I noticed. No. Mom nodded. Okay. That was it. No wounded expression. No sigh. No guilt. Taryn stood. Can I hug you? Another question nobody in my family used to ask. I thought about it. Not today. Her face fell slightly. Then she nodded. Okay. That mattered too. I drove to the lake. Dad's old Ford pickup was mine by then. Not because I took it from Taryn. She gave it to me. A month after Christmas, she showed up at my house with the keys. Dad left it to you, I said. I know. Then keep it. She shook her head. I liked being the daughter who got Dad's truck more than I actually like owning Dad's truck. That sentence stopped me. She placed the keys in my hand. You helped him rebuild the transmission. That doesn't matter. It does to me. I accepted it. Not as repayment. As evidence she was beginning to distinguish between wanting something and wanting to be seen receiving it. At the cottage, I walked to the dock. October wind moved across the water. Dad's old metal chair still sat near the edge. I sat. For a long time, I did absolutely nothing. That was difficult for me. My whole life had taught me that love was a job. Somebody needed organizing, driving, forgiving, rescuing, understanding. Dad had left me buildings. What I really inherited was permission. Permission to disappoint people. Permission to own something without defending ownership. Permission to love Mom without becoming her employee. Permission to understand Taryn without excusing her. Permission to admit. Caleb had once been good without letting goodness from 5 years earlier buy access to me forever. Over the next year, the duplexes remained extremely unglamorous. Stanton's furnace finally died. A tenant clogged a bathtub badly enough that water appeared in the kitchen ceiling below. Mr. Ellis still paid rent on the 3rd because his pension still came late. I kept the properties. Not because they were worth $2.4 million, because Dad was right. I liked the work. I knew the people. I understood what I was maintaining. I used part of the rental income to create a small literacy fund at my school in Dad's name. Nothing fancy. Books, field trips, replacement glasses for children whose families could not afford them quickly. When the principal suggested a plaque, I laughed. Dad would have hated a plaque, then secretly driven every electrician he knew past the school to show them. Mom changed slowly, not perfectly. One Sunday she called. Taryn is having a difficult week. Maybe you could. Then she stopped. Silence. I'm doing it again. Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you. That was progress. She no longer required me to pretend it was enough. Taryn's progress was stranger. Therapy. No new relationship for more than a year. She sold part of the salon expansion she had financed too aggressively and paid down debt. She and Shane divorced. There was no dramatic reconciliation between them. He was civil, that was all. One afternoon, almost 18 months after Christmas, Taryn drove to the cottage. I watched her car pull in. She walked onto the porch holding 2 coffees, then stopped. She knocked. I opened the door. Can I come in? I nearly cried. Not because the question was extraordinary, because in our family it was. Yes. She came inside. We sat at Dad's kitchen table. For almost an hour we talked about him. Not Caleb, not Mom, not inheritance. Dad. Taryn told me a story I had never heard. When she was 13, Dad drove 3 hours through snow to pick her up from a dance competition because she had food poisoning and was too embarrassed to tell her coach. He never told me that. He made me promise. Why, she started laughing. Because I threw up in the truck. I laughed too. He would have told that story eventually. He said if I ever became too confident he was saving it. That sounded exactly like him. Then Taryn became quiet. I've been thinking about the word chosen. I looked at her. She stared into her coffee. Mom spent my whole life making me feel like love had to be demonstrated by somebody choosing me over somebody else. I waited. She'd change your plans for mine. Yes. Give me money because you had scholarships. Yes. Tell Dad I needed him more. Yes. Taryn's eyes filled. I got used to it. I said nothing. So when Caleb wanted me, she stopped. I know. She shook her head. No, I need to say it. I waited. It felt like proof. Proof of what? That I could still be picked over you. The honesty hurt. But it was clean. I'm sorry. I looked at her. I believe you. She cried. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't either. She nodded. That's fair. We sat in silence. Then she said, I think Dad knew exactly who my father was long before I did. I smiled. Warren. Yes. She smiled too. He was my dad. No hesitation. No biology. No qualification. My therapist asked if finding out changed how I remember him. What did you say? That it changed Mom. I understood. It made everything Dad did bigger. Her voice broke. He knew I wasn't biologically his, and still never once made me earn being his daughter. I looked toward the window. No. Taryn wiped her face. And Mom spent 33 years making both of us earn things Dad had already given us. That sentence stayed with me. The following Christmas, I invited Mom and Taryn to the cottage. Not because family automatically deserves holidays, because I wanted them there. That distinction changed everything. Mom asked what she could bring. I said rolls. She burned them. Some traditions survive personal growth. Taryn laughed so loudly from the kitchen I heard her from the dock. Mom shouted, I heard that. For a moment the sound carried across the water and felt almost like childhood. Almost. Not identical. I no longer wanted identical. Our old family had looked intact because I kept adjusting myself to fill the cracks. This family was smaller, more awkward, more careful, and far more honest. I sat on Dad's metal chair wearing his old work coat. The lake had begun freezing near the shoreline. I could smell smoke from somebody's fireplace across the water. Behind me, the cottage door opened. Taryn stepped onto the porch. She did not walk down the dock. Dinner's ready whenever you are. Whenever you are. Not everybody's waiting, not hurry, not mom's upset. I looked back at her. I'll be there in a minute. She nodded. Okay. Then she went inside. I stayed by the water. Dad's chair beside mine was empty. It always would be. Some losses do not turn into wisdom. They remain losses. I missed his voice, his terrible phone manners, his criticism of modern appliances, his habit of pretending every repair required exactly one more trip to the hardware store. I missed the way he called me odd when he was tired. But grief no longer felt like an empty room everyone else could fill with demands. It belonged to me. So did the cottage, the rentals, my memories, my anger, my boundaries, my forgiveness if it ever came, my life. For years, I thought being the strong daughter meant I should survive whatever everybody else needed me to absorb. Dad saw the mistake before I did. Strength is not how much disrespect you can carry without collapsing. Sometimes strength is putting something down. Caleb wanted part of the inheritance. Taryn wanted to feel chosen. Mom wanted every conflict resolved without forcing herself to face the secret underneath our family. For years, they all reached for the same thing: access. Access to my time, my guilt, my ability to fix things, my willingness to say it was fine. The money did not create that pattern. It only made the pattern impossible to ignore. When I finally stopped giving unlimited access, everyone thought I had changed. They were right. I stopped confusing being needed with being valued. I stopped believing understanding someone meant I had to excuse them. I stopped treating no like the beginning of a negotiation, and I stopped moving aside so another person could feel chosen. I stood and carried Dad's chair closer to the cottage before the temperature dropped further. Through the window, I could see Mom setting plates on the table. Taryn was trying to salvage the burned rolls. Neither one had called for me again. Neither had sent someone outside to tell me dinner was getting cold. They were simply waiting until I was ready. For the first time in my life, nobody needed me to move aside so someone else could feel chosen. And that, more than the cottage, more than the duplexes, more than the $2.4 million, was the part of my father's legacy I finally understood. So tell me this: who betrayed Audrey the worst? Caleb, Taryn, or Diane? And after everything Taryn did, would you ever have let her back into the lake house?